filling the tank. I don't think that's gas you're putting in this.
No, just water. The engine, when it's working, would use about 90 gallons of water an hour.
The object is fuel economy or fuel efficiency. So actually the team that goes the furthest on the least amount of fuel.
Motoring 91 is brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil.
Well, this week we find ourselves out in the country. Hello, everybody. Now, every now and then we like to bring you something just a little unusual. Well, this is one of those weeks. Now, as you can see, I'm standing out in the middle of a field. Now, this would not be an unusual place to find a tractor. And if you can see behind me now, approaching is a tractor. But this tractor is powered by a steam engine. Rather unusual in the 1990s, but back in the early 1900s, a steam engine was anything but unusual. Although many kinds of power have been invented since steam came into use, steam engines will never be forgotten. And it's people like Dave Sturck who keep the memories alive. A father of 5, Dave spends his working hours as an auto mechanic. And every chance he gets, he's on his tractor.
We're looking at a 1919 Sawyer Massey steam traction engine. Built by Sawyer Massey Company in Hamilton in 1919, used primarily for heavy drawbar work, field work, plowing in Western Canada, thrashing, general farm use. An engine like this would have been used for probably a lot of heavy field work, plowing likely in Western Canada. That's why it has the large water tanks on the side, and gives it a little bit more running time in the field between the trips of people hauling water to it by the wagon load. We're just a collector. We like them, we enjoy them. We spend a lot of time restoring them and keeping them in good working order. We take them to shows 2 or 3 times a year. Belong to several clubs that put shows on around southern Ontario. So when show time comes, we have a float that comes in and picks it up and hauls it to the appropriate fairgrounds, and we display them for the weekend. Sometimes use them for power demonstrations to show the public how it was done back in the early 1900s. Okay, well, this is my son, Ian. Back here we have, at the back end of the boiler, we have the door that opens into the firebox. You can see the fire down in here. This is where you have to keep the fire burning here to keep steam. If this fire goes out, then we don't have any steam and the engine doesn't run.
They can run on coal also?
Some of the bigger engines would fire on coal. If that was the case, then we'd have to shovel the coal. Normally you'd have kept the coal over here in this tank. We just use it for a toolbox right now because we don't fire this engine on coal. It's easier to fire it on various sorts of hard and soft wood. Okay, well, we were just looking in the back end of the engine and you were looking through the door into the firebox. We come around to the front and open the door to the smoke box at the front, as it's called. We can see the front tubes in the boiler. These tubes are surrounded by water. If you look down carefully in the bottom, you'll see a little bit of the fire maybe at the other end. Right now it's under pressure at 100 pounds per square inch approximately. All those tubes are surrounded by boiling hot water and steam in the top level.
This boiler has to be inspected. That's very crucial.
Boiler is inspected annually by the Ontario government. Requires a certificate each year for inspection purposes. They are quite stringent about their regulations for testing. Weight running here as it sits now, approximately 30,000 pounds. It moves on ground at about 2.5 miles an hour. These are water holding tanks that we have on each side. They're used to just carry extra water for when the engine's out working in the field or working stationary somewhere. We can fill these with water, and the injectors that put the water into the boiler will draw the water from these tanks.
How much water is in the
There's approximately 300 gallons in the boiler when it's running. This sight glass here shows the water level in the boiler now. These small taps, in case that sight glass breaks, will let us know how much water's in here, whether it's blowing water out or steam out.
What would happen, excuse me, Dave, what would happen if you didn't have, the water went too low? You weren't
It would be bad working practice to let your water level get low. If it got dangerously low, we could have a boiler explosion. That would be the fault of the operator if it happened. a dangerous situation if your water level got low. You just don't let it happen. The steam from the boiler here comes up through a series of valves into this cylinder. This drives the connecting rod back and forth. Tom will make it run here now for us. The steam drives the cylinder back and forth, turns the crankshaft, and that's basically how your steam engine works. All right, well, if we're gonna make the engine run, first we're gonna open the cylinder cocks down here to let the water out of the cylinder. This lever gives us forward and reverse direction, and this is our throttle here. That makes the engine run over. If we want to make it run the other direction, we'll just change directional rotation on the crankshaft, and it'll run the other direction. If we want to make the engine move, we're just going to wait till the crankshaft stops here. This lever engages our clutch. When we start the engine running, now we're going to move. Sometimes you have to back up a little bit to go ahead, but if you want to go forward, we're going to just change the direction of the crankshaft again. And now we're going forward. Just pull her a little bit.
After 3.5 years, General Motors of Canada has pulled the plug on Passport automobiles. The auto giant has decided to shuffle its dealer deck and identify its retail outlets by the models sold. Beginning this fall, Passport becomes Saturn, Saab, Isuzu trucks. The Isuzu Impulse is no more. It will now go by the name Geostorm, the nameplate used in the U.S. The Geo will be sold at Chevrolet Geo Oldsmobile dealerships. General Motors also used the news conference to deliver an economic pep talk to the attending journalists.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the writers of this country to take a proactive position and help this industry move forward. And I don't find anything wrong with that. Now, I know that we've taken a lot of bashing, and we can stand that. But it's just a feeling I have that you got a great opportunity to be a part of the resurgence. Sorry for the philosophy, but...
Test Drive with Graham Fletcher.
This week on Test Drive, we look at the newest member of the Acura family. Now, this vehicle will slot directly between the Legend and Integra, and as with those two vehicles, this car has a very sporty influence. This is, of course, the 1992 Acura Vigor. Acura has approached the suspension settings by employing the opposite to the norm. They have opted to use soft spring rates and firm damping characteristics rather than vice versa. The result is pleasing to say the least, if a little firm. In the pylon test, the Vigor tracked a steady, stable line that yielded no nasty surprises. Also improving things here are the engine placement. By mounting it longitudinally, Acura have achieved a 60-40 weight distribution. This helps counteract the nose-heavy feel associated with most front-wheel drive vehicles, and so the tendency to plough at the limit is minimal. On washboard-type pavement, however, the car feels a little skittish, and if you push it under these circumstances, some torque steer becomes evident, but never causes any real concern.
As you can see, this engine features 5 intake runners, meaning that it's a 5-cylinder engine. Why a 5-cylinder? Well, according to Honda, a straight 6 was too long and too heavy, and they didn't want the roughness associated with a large displacement 4-cylinder. So there you have it, 176 horses from a 5-cylinder engine.
In the 100k dash, the Vigor turned in times a little over 8.5 seconds. Generally, the throttle response is good, although below 3,000 RPM, the engine feels a little lazy. Above this figure, the engine pulls strongly past the 6,800 RPM red line to the 7,100 RPM fuel shutoff point. The Vigor uses a 4-wheel disc brake system that features Honda's 6th generation ABS system. On the skid pad, the whole setup provided straight, fade-free stops that averaged a scant 113 feet. The thought and design work that went into the interior is to be commended. The Vigor comes with a standard supplemental restraint system in the form of a driver's side airbag. The instrument cluster features a complete set of analog gauges that are easy to interpret at a glance, and all driver controls fall readily to hand. Above the rear view mirror is a small but very welcome sun visor. Flanking the interior light, you can see 2 of the numerous speakers used in the Vigor's unique digital signal processor sound system. This system uses a 16-bit microprocessor to convert an analog signal into a digital one. Some of these pre-selected settings, most notably the church setting, are unusable because of the amount of distortion. As far as the seating is concerned, there is ample room and comfort up front. The rear passengers will find the legroom offered a little tight, especially if the front seats are anywhere near fully back. Headroom is also at a premium, especially in the GS, because the standard sunroof deprives you of almost an inch of headroom. 6-footers would just not have the space required. The trunk is spacious and features a nice low liftover. While the Vigor lacks folding rear seats, it does provide a pass-through suitable for skis, as well as a ski sack complete with its own briefcase.
My pet peeve on the Vigor has to do with this grab handle. Not only is it located in a very vulnerable spot as far as the driver's concerned, it's also rock hard. What they should have done is use the softer collapsible type they've got in the back. Now to the scoreboard for a rundown on the 1992 Acura Vigor.
Honda's new 5-banger provides sufficient power to give the Vigor better than average performance. The 8.5 seconds required to reach the 100k mark is significantly better than most of the immediate competition. The handling characteristics displayed do the Vigor and the designers credit. The weight distribution and fully independent wishbone suspension, combined with the good feedback provided, ensures predictability. However, the firm nature of this whole setup will only be appreciated by true sports car enthusiasts. The Vigor required just 113 feet to stop from 80 kilometers an hour. The pedal is easy to modulate, and when the ABS is activated, the kickback and pulsation are kept to a minimum. In short, an excellent setup. The seat, suspension and general interior design give the Vigor a comfortable feel. The lack of wind noise and minimal engine noise also contribute to the overall ambience. Unfortunately, we did not have the Vigor long enough to establish an accurate fuel economy. The Vigor is a well-conceived vehicle. It offers better than average handling characteristics and a good power-to-weight ratio, all of which is housed in a very attractive package. Unlike most, I think the Vigor has a very promising future.
Well, one thing about a steam engine, it's got a loud horn and it is environmentally friendly. The same, of course, can't be said about today's cars. And with that in mind, we're now going to join our resident mechanic, Bill Gardner, and he's going to tell us about a few things he's doing to try and protect the environment.
Can you imagine for a moment how somebody that walks or cycles to work or takes public transit sees us as motorists? I mean, there we are every rush hour lined up, one person per car as a rule, with our cars just belching out emissions. So we have to look at everything we do, the way we use our cars and the way we service them to see where we can lessen our impact on the environment, because there's no question that our group is causing a problem. Now, I've been looking at some environmentally friendly products that I can use in my shop to limit my impact on the environment. I've been trying them out for about a month and they work really well. We've got 3 or 4 of them lined up here today. Brake cleaner, for example, this is a product that used to be made from a chemical called trichloroethylene, which was an ozone depleter. They've removed that chemical, and it's now biodegradable and much less offensive to use, and it works just as well. It doesn't evaporate quite as quickly. It stays wet on the rag or the component you're trying to clean, so it actually gives you more of a window to clean that product that you're trying to repair. We also have an engine cleaner, which is for degreasing or shampooing engines. It's biodegradable, but of course with a product like this you have to be careful of where you actually rinse down that engine, because the rinsate potentially could be contaminating the environment. So you need some kind of an area with a grease interceptor, as most garages would have. We've got another cleaner that's environmentally friendly and non-toxic, biodegradable for cleaning car interiors, vinyl, white walls, etc. There's a few of these products out on the market, and some people have already tried them. We have also a carburetor cleaner that's biodegradable, and I found this much less offensive to use as well. The fumes that come back from this aren't nearly as offensive to the person using them. It has a foaming action when it cleans, so it actually tends to clean for quite some time after you apply it, whereas the product that it replaced just cleaned by its power and jetting action while you were putting it on, and it didn't do much for you. There was very little residual effect. On this fuel-injected Pontiac 6000, for example, we've pulled out the idle air control motor, which is a part of the fuel injection system that regulates the idle speed. You can see that there's a fair bit of carbon and gum on this side of the pintle of that idle control motor, and we'd use a product like this carb cleaner to clean it off. Now you can see that this particular one has quite a foaming action to it, as I mentioned earlier, and you just put it on and leave it for several minutes and allow it to soak that carbon deposit off there. And it seems to work quite well, and I think we're going to have to, as a group, be prepared to pay the little bit extra. Some of these products are like 30 to 50% more expensive, but they just work much better and they're very much nicer to use. So I think we all need to dig in our pockets and shell out that little bit extra. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 91.
Well, with high gasoline prices, we're always concerned about getting the most mileage out of a gallon of gasoline. Now, when you drive a steam engine, it all boils down, I guess, to getting the most miles out of a cord of wood. Well, recently, our Steve Grant met some people who definitely have the bragging rights to getting the most miles out of possibly the smallest tank of gas.
This is the 15th year for the Shell Fuelthon. The competition attracts engineering creations from universities all over North America. So I understand you guys are the speed merchants so far.
Oh, gotta believe it. Yeah, we got 60 kilometers an hour already. We had the speedometer set on miles per hour instead of kilometers per hour, so he was just gunning it. And apparently the motorbike timed him at 60 kilometers an hour going down the back. So.
There's no extra points for speed, however. In fact, you lose points if you go faster than 48 kilometers an hour.
No, the object is fuel economy or fuel efficiency. So actually the team that goes the furthest on the least amount of fuel. And the way that we do that is that each team is given 25 milliliters of fuel to start with. They all do 5 laps of the track here at Oakville. And then the fuel is measured afterwards, and the computer extrapolates and figures out these amazing miles per gallon.
The University of Waterloo has created more or less a dynasty when it comes to fuelathons. This team has won the competition 4 years in a row and 5 times since 1982. Well, this year the pressure is really on because the university is going with a brand new vehicle, brand new body styling, and it's front-wheel drive instead of rear-wheel drive. Now, just a few weeks ago we had a chance to go to the campus and get a close-up look at the Tornado.
This year's car is called the Tornado. Last year's car is called Astro. It did very well. There's a few students about 5 years ago that did a very good job designing and building the basic Astro. And then what had happened is it was just continually refined, and the car kept on winning, so there was no need to replace it and build a new car. The car had just developed some stress fractures in the frame, so we decided to build a new car. Actually, it looks like a relatively simple car, but to design it to get everything to work and fit into a relatively compact space was rather difficult. we had to obviously have enough room for the driver, which was a problem even in last year's Astro. We had to get someone very small to fit into it. We have a Honda C70 scooter engine, and we'll just take the cover off here, show you what's underneath. Runs with it's a single cylinder 70cc motor, runs off of a carburetor. We've been working on fuel injection, but that's maybe a year or two in the future. It has a centrifugal clutch, which allows the motor to start. This motor has an electric starter, so that we can start the engine without losing any power. The cockpit was so small that we couldn't really fit a steering wheel in it, so all we have is this simple lever which actuates these two wires, and all the driver has to do to steer is push it forward and then pull back. And these wires pull on this parallelogram system here. Moving the lever tilts the rear wheel a few degrees each direction, and that is enough for the car to make it around the racetrack. Wouldn't be too good in a parking lot or anything, because it has a nice wide radius, but for closed racetrack purposes, it runs just fine.
Hopefully around 5 times.
A number of teams, they use carbon fiber, and their cars, I admit, they do look impressive. They look really nice. We have time constraints. You know, we want to get the car running and running well, and then we worry about the cosmetics. Our last car, Astro, it didn't look pretty either, but it won the last 5 years, so cosmetics, I guess, isn't everything. As long as the car works, that's our main concern.
And how did the defending champions do? Well, you'll have to tune in next week to see if the Tornado can carry on the tradition.
Well, they've parked the steam engine for the day, and we are also finished for the day. But before we go, I want to bring in Dave Sturck for one final comment. And Dave, you mentioned to me earlier that when this boiler's pressure reaches a certain level, this engine likes to let off steam in a big way. Tell me about that.
Well, that's right. The boiler has a safety valve on it that's government tested, and on this particular engine set for 115 pounds per square inch. So when the boiler pressure reaches that limit, the safety valve opens and allows it to release steam. Maintains safe operating pressure that way.
All right, now apparently it's quite a sight, but you have to wait a bit. They've stoked the fire and we got to wait till it blows its top, so to speak. So while we're rolling credits, hopefully we'll lock off the camera and watch the steam engine let off a little steam. Well, that is it for this week, but we'll be back next week for more stories on cars, steam engines, and the people who drive them.
Motoring 91 has been brought to you by Quaker State. Quaker State, one tough motor oil.